Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the 5th episode of Pat's Nation Nightly. As always, I'm Zach, co-hosted with Ben at the Patriots Beat, and we're here joined with special guest Andrew, PGS Nest. How are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing good. How you guys doing?
I'm great. May have lost Ben for a second, but he'll be back as soon as we can work all of that out. Had some technical issues going into this, but hopefully it's all going to work. He just said to go on without him for now. He'll try to get back in. All good. So we're going to start out with some news that came out yesterday, I believe it was, with the signing of Jalen Hawkins, the former Falcons and Chargers safety. Andrew, how are you feeling about that signing?
I mean, I think it's a solid depth piece. I mean, he's primarily a special teamer. He's had some reps at safety in the past. I mean, he was a pretty solid safety for the Falcons in the 2022 season. He had, 80-something tackles, a couple picks to go along with it. I mean, he could sneak onto the roster come training camp, and if he works out, then he could be a solid depth piece for the team in 2025 and so on.
Yeah, he in 2022, that was by far his best season. He played 955 defensive snaps, and he had 84 total tackles, forced a fumble, and had 2 interceptions, 6 pass defended to go along with that. So last year he wasn't quite as strong, but still solid player. Feel like he can contribute if the Patriots need him to. And like you said, he is a very solid special teamer. Ben, you got anything that you thought with the Hawkins signing?
Yeah, look, so he was drafted by Atlanta, right? Played there for a couple of seasons, as we know. He was a surprise cut. I think it was in October. He got waived by the team, which surprised people around the league. This is someone who spent, his last 4 years in Atlanta, the team he was drafted by in the fourth round. He got cut by them. LA quickly claimed him. And with the Chargers, he kind of played more of a rotational depth piece, more on special teams, not as much on the defensive side of the ball. So it's interesting to see how the Patriots will use him, if he kind of helps fill the void that Jalen Mills and Adrian Phillips, like that type of role in the box more, if he plays out of the box. So it's just going to be interesting to see how the Patriots use him.
Yeah, for sure. And again, it's a 1-year signing, not too much commitment there, but it can work out. He had, as we said before, a really strong 2022 season, so definitely some potential there. Moving on, a lot of pro day news recently. Big one today, Michigan, J.J. McCarthy working out in front of scouts, GMs, head coaches, including Gerard Mayo, including Elliott Wolf, Alex Van Pelt, and T.C. McCartney, the QB coach. Ben, I know you are the pro day guy across all of Patriots Twitter. So do you have anything for us there?
Yeah, I love my pro days. It's fun. It's an exciting time. And the Patriots like to really spread the wealth with who they're sending out to which pro day, which is really, really interesting to see. Some of these schools, like today in Auburn had their pro day, it was just Matt Evans, the area scout, representing them. I think Virginia State yesterday, it was just JT Hill, one of the area scouts. So some of these schools that the Patriots are not as interested in, they're just going to send, a scout, maybe 2 scouts. But like you said, they had a huge contingent at Michigan today to watch JJ McCarthy and Blake Corum. I mean, not as exciting as McCarthy, but that's a running back who I would love on the Patriots next season. But yeah, so there was, I think, 5 or 6 pro days today. Florida State had theirs. I know the Patriots had guys there watching Keon Coleman. The Kentucky with Ray Davis and Andrew Phillips, guys to watch. And then Boston College, safeties coach Brian Belichick, as Sophie Weller noted, was in attendance to watch Elijah Jones, he's a defensive back out of Boston College, maybe in the later rounds, 5th to 7th round type player. Definitely someone to keep an eye on for the Patriots. I know they've expressed interest in him. But yeah, it's exciting time for the NFL before this draft. You have a lot of pro days happening. And then from what I understand, the Patriots are taking it really slow with top 30 visits right now. You see most teams, like we've been saying, are getting those visits scheduled. Not as much for the Patriots yet. I expect definitely next week, in the middle, later end of next week, some top 30 visits will slowly be getting announced for the Patriots.
And that's when you're starting to ramp up. As we've mentioned before, top 30 visits are the probably most important step in the draft process besides running the card up to the commissioner. Who do you think could be a top 30 visit candidate from, either of you, if you have anybody who you'd like to mention?
Andrew, want to go first?
I'll let you go first.
All right, so it's hard because there's so many guys, and a top 30 visit doesn't necessarily mean he's a top 30 player in the draft, right? So I feel like the Patriots are definitely going to bring in all the top quarterbacks. Maybe not Caleb Williams, but definitely J.J. McCarthy. I would expect Drake May, Jaden Daniels, maybe Penix. They haven't met with him a lot. And then you start to see like specific types of position groups. So they're going to start bringing in a lot of tackles. They're going to start bringing in a lot of receivers. Xavier Legette is one I would keep my eye on. Brendan Rice, I would keep my eye on. I know I reported today that the Patriots were really interested in Christian Boyd, who is a defensive tackle at Northern Iowa. They spent a couple visits with him over the course of pro days and combine and senior bowl, whatever. But that's someone I would keep my eye on. But I feel like definitely the top wide receivers, Keon Coleman, Brendan Rice, Xavier Legette, some of those receivers who the Patriots might be able to trade back into the first round for, who ended the first round, maybe Brian Thomas out of LSU. That name might spark some conversation in New England. So that's who I think right now. But again, like these pro day visits, they could bring in Joshua Cody, a kicker out of Stanford, like he's not a top 30 player, but with Chad Ryland struggling last season, they might want to have an extended look at him.
I wouldn't rule out the tight ends either. Jatavion Sanders in the second round. They could be looking at Ben Sinnott, or Cade Stover, who could be a late day 2, early day 3 pick. I also like Tip Ryman out of Illinois. I think he could be a really good replacement as a blocker because, Pharaoh Brown is on his way to Seattle now. But yeah, I wouldn't rule out those tight ends either.
Yeah, adding on to that. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, I'm just going to add on to, there's 2 tight ends I really like out of this draft class that he didn't already mention, and that's Theo Johnson out of Penn State and Brevin Spanford out of Minnesota. Both of those pro days already happened. Both of them had great numbers at their pro days. So those are 2 guys that I'll be keeping my eye on as well.
And with Tip Raymond, the Patriots need a blocking tight end. And they could get in a hybrid type of player. But right now they have Hunter Henry. They have Austin Hooper. I think the only other rostered tight end is LaMichael Petway. So none of those guys are going to be significant blockers, guys who you can put out and just trust that they're going to be pancaking like a sixth offensive lineman out there. So Tip, I think, is a good day 3 target for the Patriots. And Ben, like you mentioned, Patriots should bring in a lot of receivers for their top 30 visits. Probably guys who are projected in the 20 to 50 range in the draft. That type of like mid to late day 1, early day 2 type of players. And it makes me think, should the Patriots trade up from pick 34 into that 25th pick range to go and get themselves a true tier 1 wide receiver or tier 2 wide receiver?
Yeah. I think they should, because the receiver class there's so much depth there. There's so many good players that it's okay if you wait to the second round. But if you want a receiver like Xavier Worthy out of Texas, Keon Coleman out of Florida State, Brian Thomas out of LSU, those guys are not going to last to the second round. So if you wait to the second round, you might have to, I don't want to say settle, because they're definitely still good receivers, but a Xavier Legette, who hasn't necessarily proven himself. He had a really good year last year, but besides that, he hasn't been playing that well at South Carolina. A Brendan Rice, obviously Jerry Rice's son, has been playing with Caleb Williams the last 2 seasons. He's good, but he's not in that tier that Keon Coleman is out of Florida State. So it just depends how the Patriots view this draft. They also need a tackle. So do you get a Patrick Paul? Does Patrick Paul fall to the 3rd round? Does Jordan Morgan out of Arizona fall to the 2nd or 3rd round? So those are all questions that it's just hard to predict before draft day actually comes. Those are conversations that we can talk about all we want now, but it won't mean anything until a team actually calls you offering to give up a semi-decent package.
Yeah, and with those like packages for trading up, I don't want to get too far into this because there's 10 of them that I could go over. But in the last 5 years, I did the research and I found all of those trade ups from the early day 2, late day 1 range into like the early to mid 20s. And it's not that expensive. The most recent would be uh Patriots fans might not love this one, but the Patriots trading back to go get Cole Strange at pick 29, KC jumping up. So that was New England getting 29, 94, 121, Kansas City getting 21, which 7 picks in the first round for, I think it was a late 3rd or maybe an early 4th, and then another 4th rounder. That's not that bad. You can give up that sort of package, most likely with future picks instead, because they really need to round out their roster with this year's draft. But I wouldn't hate that idea. Another one was probably it's another Patriots one with the Patriots trading down. Surprise, surprise. But 2020, Chargers got 23, New England gets 37 and 71. I mean, jumping up, what's the math on that? 14 spots and just adding pick 71. That's not that bad at all. So I would definitely look into it if I were the Patriots, going from 34 to maybe 25 and trying to give up, let's say, 108 and a 3rd next year. I think could be a fair package. And then you go get Brian Thomas, or you go get A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy. There's a lot of guys in that tier 2 range. And this allows you to go get a tier 2 guy instead of maybe settling for a tier 3 guy at pick 34. If you guys have anything that you want to say on that too, like, go right ahead.
Yeah, I feel like if you do end up trading up, though, I would love to see a trade down in like the 3rd round. I'd say, because this isn't the type of draft where you really want to give up a ton of draft capital. So if they do have to give up like a 4th and more, then getting some of that draft capital back would probably be a good move.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I mean, they need to round out their roster really badly. So it's going to come from the draft and from undrafted free agency. They don't have a lot of picks, so a trade back with that third round pick and maybe in the fourth round as well could definitely help bolster the team a bit.
Yeah, it's good news though that the tackle and wide receivers classes in this year's draft is just there's so many good players, all around. From the first round to the fourth or fifth round, they are really good players. You can't miss on any of these picks. From the first round pick, your second, and your third, at least two of those guys, I would say, have to be Pro Bowl caliber players. Like you just cannot afford to miss on one of these draft picks. You're not going to be drafting at number 3 every single year. At least that's not the hope, So like we were saying last episode, things have kind of changed. There's a report that Jaden Daniels is now more likely to go to Washington, which would put the Patriots in prime position for Drake May. So you get your quarterback, hopefully your franchise quarterback, and then you attacked all your other positions you need. You need a wide receiver. You need some tackles. You need a defensive back. You're going to need a tight end, maybe a RB3. So you have a ton of positions in there that you're going to need.
Yeah, and with all of those needs, and this kind of shifts us into the perfect draft, but I do have a little bit of news here. The Patriots, per source, met with Utah's Sione Vaki formally after his pro day. And the Patriots also, I'm told, like him as an offensive player. Vaki is able to play really everywhere. He spent a large majority of his time this past season at safety, but he's also played slot corner, box, running back, receiver, where, like I said, the Patriots seem to prefer him. So there's some news for you guys. Ben, like you said, they really have a lot of holes to fill. And Vaki that's one player who can go and play at really like 5 different positions that the Patriots have a need for. Not all at the same time, obviously, but just a good piece all around.
Yeah, there's 3 players, I would say, for me at least, in this draft class that are fun football players. That's how I like to put it. They're fun football players. Sione Vaki, Dylan Laube, and Luke McCaffrey. All 3 of those players are the type of guy you can just tell. They love football, and that's someone you can get in the later rounds that could develop into maybe a Julian Edelman-esque like role for the Patriots. Punt returner, but also can play wide receiver.
For sure. And I mean, the Patriots could use one of those guys who's just, they have a good amount of players who bring the energy, but they still need more. You can never have too many of them. And just fan favorites, guys like that. Obviously, the perfect draft includes drafting the best players available, but you also want to get some guys that the fans are going to love and that are really going to stick to the hearts of the fan base.
Absolutely. If the Patriots were to draft that quarterback, third overall, there can never be enough quarterback first round talk, at least for the Patriots this offseason. Andrew, who is your pick, third overall?
Third overall, I mean, it really depends on how the QBs are ranked on their board. I mean, like me and Zach were talking about a little earlier, they don't really have a choice with who drops in terms of May or Daniels. So I mean, if they like the QB that's there, then obviously, like if you believe in him, you should take him. But I mean, if you're hesitant and you're not entirely sure, I mean, I wouldn't rule out a trade down with like the Vikings or something, getting some extra draft capital. So then you could position yourself to take a QB a little later, but not too late. Because I don't really love the later guys aside from like Penix, like just out of the Penix range. I'm not a huge fan of those guys. I don't think they can really be very quality starters in the NFL. But yeah, and then you can also get some draft capital for next year. And if you're looking for a QB, then you can also use that draft capital to trade up further and up the draft board to take one.
Yeah, I mean, the Patriots, again, we've touched on it a lot, but they have so many holes where just getting more picks could be could be the play. So I don't hate the idea of a trade down if their guy isn't there on the board at 3 because they probably have a preference there, whether it's Daniels or May, and maybe there's not a big gap between the two in their eyes, but also maybe there is. So I'd be interested to see what they're going to do.
Yeah, like I said, you just can't miss. This is a really, really important draft for this year, but also for the franchise. I mean, you're getting your franchise quarterback. We saw in 2021, everyone thought it was Mac Jones. You got your franchise quarterback. You just never surrounded him with the talent that he needed to be surrounded with. So you get a do-over, per se, right now. You get another franchise quarterback, but now you have to make sure that you surround him with enough talent on both sides of the ball for the quarterback to elevate the team to a potential playoff caliber team.
Yeah, for sure. And does that bring up I mean, I guess just later in the later rounds, we've talked about the perfect draft in the first few rounds, QB, wide receiver, offensive tackle. What positions should they target in maybe the 4th or the 5th?
Yeah. I think Andrew said it earlier. You need that tight end. Taylor Brown was the main blocking tight end for the Patriots. Austin Hooper doesn't really block well. He doesn't really block at all, per se. Hunter Henry, we know, doesn't really block at all. You need that blocking tight end. And there's a bunch of them in this draft, like we said. There's all over the place. There are tight ends that you could get, ranging from, like I said, Theo Johnson, Brevin Spanford, Sanders out of Texas. There's a lot of them. And after that, you're going to need another running back. You got Antonio Gibson. You have Ramondre Stevenson. I think it's unlikely for Zeke to come back at this point just because he hasn't already. And if he leaves, you're just going to need another running back on a rookie deal. My favorite, like I said before, I really like Blake Corum out of Michigan. I like Marshawn Lloyd a lot out of USC. Those are two guys, especially Lloyd, who I think would fit the Patriots offense really well. But yeah, you got to attack the offense this draft. But you also can't forget about the defense. Zach and I, we talked about last episode all of these defensive players who are coming up on the contract years this year. Jonathan Jones, Matthew Judon, Jelani Tafai. These are all players, Adrian Phillips. These are all players that are going to be free agents next offseason. So you also can't forget about the defense. And you only have so many picks. So I would like to see maybe a defensive back, linebacker in the 5th or 6th round. I haven't done enough research right now just to give out a good opinion on who's that linebacker in the 6th round, who's going to be a sleeper. But you can't forget about the defensive side of the ball as well.
For sure.
Yeah,
and go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. What are you gonna say?
No, you can. No, you're good. Go. You're the guest, Andrew.
I mean, I agree with you with tight end, or I agree with what Ben was saying about needing a tight end, needing a running back, because right now your third running back is Kevin Harris, and Antonio Gibson is more helpful receiving wise than running the ball. But I wouldn't mind like a double dip at offensive tackle at some point. You know, I love Rouse from Oklahoma as a day 3. And like you said, with the defense, you can't forget about that. I really like Josh Newton at TCU. I feel like he plays very similar to Jack Jones. He's very quick on his feet. He can jump cut in front of the ball very quickly. I like him a lot. And then I wouldn't mind a safety either, or just buffering up at edge, because you don't really know how long Judon's going to last. And also with Josh Uche on a 1-year deal, you don't know if he's going to be retained. So I think you need some more depth there at edge.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's again just so many different holes the Patriots have. They need depth pretty much everywhere. Their roster right now, I think they're sitting at maybe 70 players. could be a bit less. So probably the majority of the next 20 are going to come from the draft, where they'll make 8 picks. I think that's what they're sitting at right now, but that could go up or down depending on a trade up or a trade down. And then probably with undrafted free agency, I would not be shocked to see the Patriots bring in 10 or 12 guys, maybe more, just to round out their roster and hopefully hit on one of those guys like they really relied on in the Belichick era. Not so much in the more recent years, but that was a big way of filling out the Patriots roster in the 2010s and 2000s, was just getting a lot of good players as undrafted free agents and developing them, turning them into superstars. So I think with that, we're going to go into questions that we received from you guys. Also, if you have any questions on Twitter or YouTube, go ahead and comment them and we'll put them on the screen. But these are questions that we got before the show that you guys wanted us to answer. So starting out, is it likely that the Patriots could trade for T. Higgins?
I'll start this one off. No, I don't think so. I think if this was 2021, I think it would be way more likely. I feel like, one, you're going to have to trade a little too much for Higgins, in my belief. Two, I don't necessarily know that a trade like that would help the Patriots so much, just because you're more than that quarterback away. You're more than that wide receiver away. If you have to give a second-round pick for T. Higgins, yes, it's T. Higgins, but you just lost a potential receiver who could maybe put up around the same amount of yardage as T. Higgins could, and is also on a rookie contract. So unless you can get him for maybe like a player and a fourth, something like that, I don't think you can. I think he's going to request too much, or the Bengals are going to request too much. So I don't think it's likely. Hopefully it can maybe change, because as a fan, like in the fan perspective, I would love Higgins with the Patriots. I just don't think it's going to work out for both sides.
Andrew, anything? Or
Yeah, I mean, I don't think the Bengals will be too eager to move off of him. Like if they don't get a deal that they like they're probably just going to keep him because they still got Burrow, they still got Chase, they still got quite a bit of their key guys. They're going to want to make a playoff push and obviously try and get to a Super Bowl again. I don't know how likely that is, but Higgins would definitely help them do that, obviously. And I mean, it really depends on how much you're giving up. Like we said a little bit ago, talking about like just this is a draft where you don't want to give up too much draft capital. Like you're gonna want as many picks as you can possibly get. It all depends on their asking price.
yeah, I would not be surprised if with Higgins it turns into he doesn't get traded before the draft. They head into training camp with him and he holds out for a long-term deal. And whether the Bengals give that to him or they then trade him, we'll see, or they make him play on the tag. But I would be kind of surprised if Higgins gets traded as of right now, but that can change so quickly too. Just I don't know how realistic it is that the Bengals will be able to get somewhere like a pick in the 25 to 35 range, which Higgins would probably that would be a fair compensation. But with how deep this year's wide receiver class is, I don't know if that'll happen. It just might be kind of hard to move him. So I would say it's a possibility, but not all that likely. I'm moving on to a similar question from Ken. What is a realistic trade for the veteran wide receiver market? Is it T. Higgins or someone else? I think Higgins or Ayuk, and I'll expand on that after. But those are the two guys whose names have floated around the most. I don't know if the Patriots will be able to get either of them, though.
Yeah. those are two good players, and we just talked about Higgins a little bit. You bring up
Well, Ben froze, so I'll take it over. Higgins, Higgins, like we just mentioned it, possible but not all that likely. And Ayuk, people are freaking out about the trade offer that the 49ers sent the Jaguars, which was, I believe, pick 17 and Zay Jones for Ayuk. I mean, AJ Brown, who was not as good as Ayuk when he got traded, got pick 18 and 101. And Zay Jones has not really put up anything all, hasn't really been that great of a receiver recently. So I would say I'd rather have pick 18 and 101 than have 17 and Zay Jones. Like that's a better value. You're getting a better value by trading for Ayuk than the Eagles ended up getting in the AJ Brown trade. So I don't know if the Patriots can give that up. They're sitting at 34. They're kind of right in the middle, like what Ayuk would end up getting, the trade compensation there. You're not going to give up 3 for Ayuk, and you probably can't give up 34 for Ayuk. So I don't know who a realistic option would be, to be honest. It's probably Higgins is the most realistic, but not super likely. And then from the chat, Carlos asking, pick one, Higgins or Ayuk as a better fit for the team. Andrew, what do you think? Oh,
I like Ayuk a little bit better. I think I just think he's a little more talented than Higgins, and I think he'd work out better here. Although, like you alluded to, the price for Ayuk would be a lot, most likely. Um, and I mean, going back to um, like realistic trade targets too. I think the next most realistic one would be like Cortland Sutton, but at the same time, I don't think you really want to give up any draft capital for a guy like Sutton or anyone else. Like, I think it would either be Higgins or Ayuk, and I would personally prefer Ayuk, but that would be really tough to do.
yeah. I mean, I think Ayuk is no question. He's a better player. It also might depend on which QB you end up going with. Maybe you like the fit of Higgins more with Daniels more than you like Ayuk with Daniels, or maybe you like Ayuk with May more. It all it all just kind of depends on what else happens. But I would say Ayuk's the better player, probably the better fit. Higgins had a bit of a down year last year. So if I could trade for one in an ideal world, it would be T. Higgins.
Yeah,
And
you also
next,
got to before
go ahead.
really quick. Can I just add one thing? Sorry, I keep glitching in and out. Technical
No, you're
difficulties have
good.
not been my friend today. Brandon Ayuk is also entering his 5th-year option right now. He's in a contract year, so that's just something to monitor. If you trade for him before the season starts, you're gonna have to extend him basically 9 months later, 8 months later. So if you trade for him, like both of these guys, you're also going to have to pay them, which is just another reason why I would just rather get that, second round receiver, late first round receiver in the draft instead.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree, but then you can also think of it as, well, when you're trading for T. Higgins or Brandon Ayuk, you know you're getting a heck of a player. Whereas when you're trading up in the draft for in that 25 range, or you're staying at 34 for a receiver, hopefully they turn into the best receiver in the league. But they could also be N'Keal Harry. They could be someone who you end up trading 2 years later, 3 years later for like a future 7th round pick because they're just not good. So would you rather have to pay up now and give up a similar capital with, in terms of the draft value? Because when you're trading for one of those guys, you're probably giving away the pick that you would take a wide receiver with. So it's just just balancing the benefits of a surefire guy compared to but having to pay him compared to risking it for a guy who could be better, but also will more than likely be worse, but not having to pay that guy. I think it's just something important to keep in mind there uh, with the hopes of trading for a receiver or drafting one. So now we have Teddy. Are we going QB with our first pick? I'll let you guys
Yes.
take the floor.
Yes. You can't, like you guys were saying, you just can't afford to not get that quarterback. The only scenario that I would even consider is if you can get Joe Alt with a trade back. Or even if you can get, it's again unlikely. Something's happened. If Minnesota trades up with Washington and gets JJ McCarthy second overall, then you have, you can make there's some crazy things that happen in the draft where maybe you look at it and you can be like, oh, we can adjust to do this. But right now, you got to get that quarterback with your first pick. I just don't really see any other logic behind not doing that.
Yeah,
I agree with what you're saying too. Like, once again, going back to the draft board, it all depends on who they like, who the Pats like in terms of the QB. But I think in the end, they'll ultimately take the best available QB. And I think the next best option would be a trade down, getting more draft capital, setting yourself up for any future moves. But yeah, I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with both of you guys, or I guess I agree with taking a QB, unless you're just not fully confident in the guy who's there. But if you are, which it sounds like the Patriots will be, you need a quarterback in the NFL. So that's what I think they're going to do. Now, next up from John, will the Patriots go get the QB they want with trading up to pick 2 or trading up to pick 1, rather than waiting on who drops to 3? This is an interesting one because it's not an idea that's been brought up a lot. Most people have just been stay at 3 or trade down. I don't think trading up is realistic, but what do you guys think?
What I'm not a fan of is the Patriots settling for a quarterback they didn't want coming into the draft process. So if all the Patriots chips are in Jaden Daniels, and Jaden Daniels gets drafted by Washington, I don't want them to settle for Jake May. So that kind of contradicts what I just said. Like if that happens, if the Patriots are going all in on Jaden Daniels and he goes to Washington, then you regroup, you can trade back. You can get those extra draft picks and then maybe get Joe Alt at 5 and 6 and then go from there. If you're 50-50 on a guy, hey, if May drops to 3, we love him. I'm going to take him. If Daniels drops to 3, we love him. We're going to take him. Then get that quarterback. But if you're not all in on a quarterback, there's absolutely no reason to get him.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, the Bears, it seems like they're set in stone on drafting Caleb Williams at this point. And that'd probably be the QB I'd really only want to trade up for, because I also don't think the Commanders would want to do that either. I think they just take who they think will be a better fit for them, whether it's May or Daniels.
Yeah, and also I think, I mean, from what we've heard so far, it sounds like the Patriots are fine with any of the 3 quarterbacks. It sounds like whoever's on the board at 3, whether it be May or Daniels, they're not going to be settling because they like them both. There's probably some sort of preference with one of them, but they're going to be getting a very good quarterback prospect either way. So I just don't think it's all that likely that they trade up. I don't think that they really should unless they can go get Caleb for a not ridiculous price, which it would take a ridiculous price. So yeah, I mean, I also think that the Commanders from, again, what we've heard recently, are going to go with Jaden Daniels, and I personally would prefer Drake May. So you never know there, but maybe the Patriots don't have to trade up to get who they want. Moving on to the next one. Are you sitting Daniels or May if you draft them, no matter how they do in camp? So even if they show out in training camp, are you going to sit them?
Why? If they play well at training camp, why sit them? You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what happened with Cam Newton and Mac Jones. Cam Newton was signed he was a late signing. I want to say June. I think he was signed in June that year. And then the following year, Mac Jones played better than him during the summer, during training camp. And Mac Jones, I think it was that Giants inter squad practice.
Yeah.
And then after that, like I'm remembering, and then after that, it was Mac Jones's job to lose at that point. So if you get Drake May, he comes into New England, balls out during camp, plays really well during the preseason games, then you sit Jacoby Brissett week 1. I mean, like, why not? Like, if he plays well, why?
Yeah, I mean,
exactly.
if they're playing well enough, just start them. Maybe the team would feel the opposite, and it also might depend on who you're drafting. Daniels is probably more pro ready to just go, whereas May, I think, is a better prospect, but he would probably benefit more from sitting than Daniels would. But if they feel like, oh, we're looking at Drake May and all of our negatives for him going into the draft, he's really fixed them in training camp. He fixed that footwork. He's more consistently accurate. Then you might as well just start him because you really have nothing to lose there. If he's showing out, of course. I don't want to try to pronounce that. Realistic day 2 QB options you like if we trade back to build up the roster. Spencer Rattler or Michael Penix.
Yeah. Penix isn't going to go round 1, I don't think. I think Penix is going to go later than a lot of people think. But again, like, the Patriots they've had more interaction with Sam Hartman of Notre Dame than they have of Michael Penix, you know? Like, they've had almost no communication with Penix, reportedly. They didn't meet with him at the Combine, you know. The Patriots are not going to be able to go to his pro day. So, yeah, Spencer Rattler is a great name. I think he's going to play really well in the NFL. I was talking to Jim Nagy at the Senior Bowl director, and he said there's a lot of guys that the media hire on in the NFL, and there's a lot of guys that these general managers in the NFL are higher on than the media. And Spencer Rattler is someone who the NFL is higher on than the media, and who should be a good player in the National Football League next year.
Yeah, I like Penix a little more than Rattler. I think he has more on the table to give overall and in the long term. I think Rattler is more of like, I think he can be sort of just a I'm trying to think of the word for it, but like a little under a quality starter, just like an average starter in the league. But that's like at his best. Like at that point, I'd rather just take a QB in the first, because it doesn't seem like the Pats are too into Penix at this point.
Yeah, I'd wonder if maybe, because it came out that no team, or that Penix didn't have any red flags on his medicals at the Combine. But I still do think, and this is all speculation, that there's a chance maybe the Patriots medical team found something, and that's why they haven't really met, because all 32 teams do a separate physical. They're not going to, it's not just one physical that the players do. So so they do it with the team doctors from each team individually. And maybe that's why the Patriots haven't really had as much interest in Penix. Maybe they found something and it just hasn't gotten out to the media. I don't know how likely that is, but I just don't understand any other justification for why they have had seemingly zero contact with Michael Penix. Now, if the Commanders take Drake May, is it better to take Daniels or Marv? You need a quarterback. We've said it a lot. Ben,
Yeah,
I
think
know
that's
you
it.
have a
Yeah.
strong Ben. Even if the Commanders took Marv, would take Daniels. So no matter what, Ben wants Daniels. Andrew, I don't know. Are you a May guy or a Jaden Daniels guy?
I'm a May guy, although I think Daniels is a little more NFL ready than May. Just May, he showed some very poor decision making, and his footwork is freaky and not in a good way. Um, but but I think May in the long term, if he can sit for a year, unless like we said earlier, he shows out in camp. If he can sit for a year, I think he'll be better than Daniels. And I mean, we've seen that kind of happen in the past. We've seen Jordan Love last year kind of show out. We've seen it with Aaron Rodgers. We've seen it with Pat Mahomes. Not saying it's like the right move for every QB, but I think that would be the right move for him.
Yep.
Real quick, the only reason I say, yeah, really quick, the only reason that we'll get more into this next week, but Jaden Daniels, like you said, the only negative I see in him is he's just a little too small for my liking, and he takes too many hits. That's it. Besides that, he has a really polished, balanced game. He runs well, he throws well, deep ball, all that stuff, and he's a 5-year player. Unlike May, who has only started 2 seasons, he has way less games started and played in than all these other quarterbacks in the draft. And he has, like you said, he has questionable judgment under pressure. Added to that, he hasn't had that game yet where you go like, wow, like that he's gonna be good. Like he just hasn't. There was never that one game that made me think like he's a top 3 pick in the NFL.
My thing with Daniels is he's just like his processing is a little iffy for me, and I don't know. Yeah, I also don't see him throw with a lot of NFL level anticipation a lot of the time, and I don't know. Sometimes if he doesn't like what he sees, he'll just run into a hole that's not there.
Yeah, and then he'll try to hurdle and take the biggest hit you've ever seen. Up next, is there a chance the Patriots could get A.D. Mitchell or Xavier Worthy? Not at 34, I don't think, but we touched on it earlier. I personally would love the Patriots to move up and get a guy like that. Get a tier 2 guy instead of a tier 3 guy. So maybe they move up to 25, 26, 27, and they go get one of those guys. What do you think?
The only way you're going to get him is if you trade back into the first round, like we were saying. Like, I think Mitchell has a chance. Mitchell will last in the second round, actually. I take that back. Mitchell will be in the second round, I think. I think Xavier, so. I think there's just too many receivers above him. I think Xavier Worthy is getting drafted by Dallas. If it's not Dallas, it's Kansas City. I think one of those 2 teams, maybe Tampa Bay in there. One of those teams in that 22 to 27 range or to 32 range are going to get Worthy.
I like A.D. Mitchell a lot. I have him as like my personal wide receiver 4 in the class. If the pass could go up and get him, I would love that. And I mean, I don't know, it's a little tough because I think he could go in the early like 20s range, along with like Brian Thomas Jr. over there. But I think 27 could be a fairly realistic spot to trade up with, because the Cardinals are a team who like to trade back, and they'd also have back-to-back picks at that point at 33 and 34. But yeah, I would love to see them get Mitchell. Worthy, I'm a little less high on. I saw I saw someone on Taylor Kyle's show the other day. He like, in my opinion, gave the perfect example of what Worthy is. He's like seasoning to an entree. Like he's a great compliment, but I just don't see him as a genuine one. And I think the Pats should be looking to get a one, as we all know, in this draft. But and I think after Adonai Mitchell, after Brian Thomas Jr., that gets a little tricky to find that one.
Yeah, I'd say I know you said you have Mitchell as your wide receiver 4. I'd say for me, he's wide receiver 5. You have the obvious top 3 with Harrison, Neighbors, Odunze, and then I'd probably go Brian Thomas Jr. and then AD Mitchell. But whether you have him at 4, 5, 6, probably even 7, that's more than likely not going to last to pick 34. There's going to be a run on receivers, a crazy run on receivers at some point. So the Patriots would probably have to move up if they want either of those guys. And I don't think it's an unrealistic option just because you're not going to have to give up a ton of draft capital. Now, speaking of wide receivers, and Andrew, I know you mentioned AD Mitchell, hopefully a true wide receiver 1. What's your ideal depth chart for 2024?
I'm gonna try and take this with as realistic approach as I possibly can. So right now we got Osborne, KB, we got Pop still, and I might put Juju in there just because it's probably going to be really difficult to get off of his contract at this point. I don't think they'll be able to move him, and if they cut him, they'd be taking on a lot of dead money over the next couple of years. So I think a trade up, so it'd be Osborne, KB, Juju, Pop, and then I think a fifth could be probably a trade up candidate like we were just talking about. AD Mitchell, who else? Maybe Troy Franklin could be there, Xavier Legette. Um, and then I think a double dip in the draft could be helpful, whether it's early day 3, late day 3. Or, I mean, you could take one in the third round, but I think if you trade up, then that spot could be reserved for like an offensive tackle. But yeah, so probably those 4, and then a trade up candidate, and then probably just another double dip in the draft.
Yeah, for me personally.
You go. Nope. You go. I've been cutting you off all show. You
go. So for me personally, realistic, or I guess ideal, get Brandon Ayuk, but I don't think that's realistic. So I would just go similar to yours, where you have AD Mitchell or Brian Thomas Jr., somebody like in the upper echelon of the draft as your wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, Kendrick Bourne, and then Pop Douglas, KJ Osborne. I'd probably rather keep Taekwon than Juju. I'm still holding out hope that Taekwon Thornton can be something. We've seen all of those workout videos of him with Kendrick Bourne and with Bailey Zappi and a few others Pop was there too. And Taekwon Thornton is massive now. He put on some muscle mass. He has a whole like suit of armor now, whereas before he was a wooden plank. He was as skinny as could be. So I'm still holding out hope. He didn't have a productive season, obviously, but I did like what I saw in that. I think it was the Browns game. He didn't have a ton of catches or anything, but I thought he was getting open rewatching the game. Just Zappy wasn't really looking his way. So I would probably rather keep Taekwon or over Juju. And then again, like you said, go get somebody late day 3 or maybe middle day 3 who you also think can play wide receiver. Go double dip.
Yep. You guys both said everything I was going to say. I feel like it's really important this draft to double dip at receiver. You take one in the first couple rounds, and then someone like Jacob Cowling out of Arizona, kind of a smaller Z type receiver. You could take him in like the 6th round, maybe 5th or 6th round. So yeah, I would love to double dip at receiver. And then You guys haven't really mentioned Taekwon a lot. I really want him to have a breakout season. You see him, working out with Kendrick Bourne and Zappy and all those guys. He's putting on muscle. But yeah, I mean, you guys hit all of it. I think you double dip at receiver, and you go from there.
Yeah, and actually, Cowan, honestly, not someone I'd really want to see the Patriots pursue. I think he's a great player, just not wouldn't be the best fit just because you already have a somewhat similar guy with Pop Douglas. Just small receiver is going to do work for you, but I don't know if Cowan would be the best fit. And that actually does kind of transition us into the next question, which for me, the question from Duckboat God, which by the way is a great username. How much do you value scheme fit when it comes to evaluating wide receivers in the draft? Which guys specifically could you see have success or failure in this offense? I would say early on, you're not really putting like scheme fit into it, and that's just me personally, my opinion. You just need a ball player, whereas later you kind of start to say, oh, this guy doesn't fit our scheme, like Jacob Cowan. We already have a guy like that, where you're just looking for scheme fits in the later rounds, in my opinion. But early on, I would say you're not really, you shouldn't be taking guys off your board because they're not a great scheme fit.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Um,
No, I'll let you go.
no, you're the guest. Go ahead.
All right, I was just gonna add that, and like trying to relate to what you were saying a little bit. The Pats aren't a team that can really be nitpicky with their wide receivers. Like, I think the teams that can do that are the ones who made the playoffs, who were close to a Super Bowl, who were in the Super Bowl, and can sort of look in this wide receiver group and nitpick the one that best fits their offense for their specific receiver need. The Pats have a bigger receiver need than those other teams. That, like, at this point, you just gotta like go get the talent, the guy with as much talent as possible. But then you can start looking at scheme fit in the later rounds.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking at scheme fit and prioritizing that in the earlier rounds, I think that's when you take Jalen Reagor over Justin Jefferson. Like, it's things like that just in the first round, I think you have to go get talent, and second and third rounds too. Moving on.
Next question.
Okay. Will the Patriots retrofit skill positions depending on which QB is drafted? Also, who will be their third running back? Eric does not want Kevin Harris. For me, I would say maybe do it a little bit. If you're drafting Jaden Daniels, you're probably going to want more of like a burner, somebody who can just go deep, because Daniels' deep ball is like top tier. Whereas if you're getting May, maybe you can focus on more of a technician type of player, like a Ladd McConkey, like a Roman Wilson. But I mean, do you guys agree with that, with the skill position, depending on which QB we get?
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying before, is you just have to adjust. We can talk as much as we want about what the Patriots are going to do, but no one knows until that draft actually happens and players start, going off the board. Like I said before, I would love Marshawn Lloyd out of USC. I think he's the perfect balance between a power runner, someone who can catch the ball well and just turn on the jets when needed. So that's someone I would like. Blake Corum, obviously out of Michigan, but I think you're going to have to put a fifth-round pick for him. But Marshawn's someone who I think can go in the sixth, maybe sixth round.
Yeah, I really like that Marshawn Lloyd pick too. I also like Ray Davis out of Kentucky. He's more of a power back, but he's also gotten some receiver work too. I know they just got Gibson, but it never hurts to have oh my God, have a versatile back. And I also like Dylan Johnson out of Washington. I think he can be a solid running back 3 for them who can maybe um, add some depth in case Ramondre ends up departing next offseason. But we'll see where that goes.
I was going to mention Ray Davis as well. I thought all of the Senior Bowl guys really had a solid week. Dylan Laube as well, but I don't think it's as likely that the Patriots get Laube now because of the Antonio Gibson signing. I think they play a somewhat similar role. But yeah, really any of the Senior Bowl guys, I thought they all had a great week, could potentially be drafted to be a third running back. And I know Eric said he doesn't want Kevin Harris, but I thought he played well in a small sample size, but I don't think that Kevin Harris is a bad NFL player, and I would not be surprised to see him have a bit of an expanded role next season. So now, last but not least, from Respect Sport, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to comment them, and we'll get to those after. But who are some day 3 draft picks that you want the Patriots to draft the most? I'm going to start out because I mentioned him earlier. Go get Sione Vaki, please. He might go on day 2. I wouldn't be surprised to see him go on day 2. But if he's there at pick, it's 108, right? Is their 4th round pick? Then go get Sione Vaki.
I'll do 2. Maryland offensive tackle Delmo Glaze. He went to the Senior Bowl. A primarily left tackle, but also plays right tackle too. He splits a lot between the two. That's someone who's under the radar, who's going to be good in the NFL, I believe. I think he's got a lot of good tape to watch, a lot of good college production. And then I'll go Luke McCaffrey. I mean, former quarterback, then wide receiver, brother with Christian McCaffrey, son of Ed McCaffrey. Football's in his DNA. So those are 2 players right there, Delmo Glaze and Luke McCaffrey.
I know I talked about briefly Josh Newton and Tim Riemann a little bit, but I'm gonna pivot away from them. He might be in a late day 2 pick, but he could sneak into early day 3. I really like Javon Baker out of UCF. He's got the physical attributes. He's really good at high pointing the ball, playing the ball, and knowing how to position his body correctly. He's got a pretty good release. He's not necessarily like a huge separator, but I think he gets enough separation where he's still pretty effective. And he can also play as an X receiver, which the Pats kind of need right now with Devontae Parker going to Philadelphia. And they don't really have anyone to kind of fill in his spot right now. So I think Baker could be a really good pickup.
Perfect. Well, unless you guys have any more questions in the comments, that is going to be it for tonight's show. So thank you all for listening. Andrew, go ahead and tell them where they can find you because we really appreciate you coming on tonight.
Yeah, no, thank you guys for having me on. I had a lot of fun. You can find me at NestPGS on Twitter if you're not watching on Twitter already. You can also see my articles on the Patriots beat along with Ben's. He does a really good job on that website. But yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Andrew for coming on. He was our first guest. Zach and I, this is our 3rd show right now. So it means a lot. And 5th show? Oh my gosh. I mean, time flies, I guess. 5th show. Excuse me. But Zach and I both want to thank you a lot. Like we were saying, every Friday we're gonna have a different guest on. Andrew may be popping in again in the next couple months, weeks, whenever. But we have a fun lineup of guests coming on for the next couple weeks. And next episode is TBD. We don't know. Zach and I still trying to figure out. But definitely follow Pats Nation Night on Twitter. Pats Nation Nightly wasn't available. So follow Pats Nation. It's right there. Follow us on our socials so you can keep up with all the latest show dates. But yeah, thank you. Have a good weekend, guys. I mean, it's Friday.
Yep. Andrew, thank you for coming on. To the 656 listeners in here, thank you for tuning in. I believe that is all we got for you tonight. Go ahead. I'm Zach. Pats.today on Instagram, Any Patriots Today on X. You can also find the show's Instagram and X down below, right below Ben. Yeah, Ben, you have a better. There we go. Right below Ben. Go ahead and follow on there. Until then, we'll see you next time. Thank you all for tuning in today.